For folks that follow my channel, you'll probably already know that I do another series with my amazing rev generator amplifier called Can Rev Do, where I kind of dive in and try to create some classic tones or get in the ballpark of some classic tones utilizing the rev generator amp in conjunction with its onboard 2-notes Torpedo remote software. Now, this has sparked a lot of interest from folks in the Rev and 2-Notes community, but also from folks in the Helix community who follow my channel who've shown great interest in some of the 2-Notes DynIR products and wondering how they would work in conjunction with the Helix. One complaint that you hear a lot on the internet, not one that I necessarily agree with, but one that you do hear is that the Helix stock cabs are terrible. You can't get any good sound of the Helix unless you use some sort of third-party impulse response. And we do have an impulse response loader built into the Helix, and many folks do utilize this. I love the stock cabs. I use the stock cabs. I think they're great. I think I can get as good a sound out of those as I can out of any other third-party IR. And I've done it with many of the tones that I've created. But again, if someone feels that they need to use third-party IRs, then they should absolutely do that. But I had a lot of interest in folks asking, how could we incorporate these 2-Notes DynIRs into the Helix? And it got me thinking about, can we use some of the 2-Notes products to really, as I mentioned, supercharge our Helix, and not just simply as an impulse response loader for third-party impulse responses or the 2-Notes proprietary DynIRs, but some other functions that are built into one amazing 2-Notes product that I have, and that is the Torpedo C.A.B M+. This is a unit I've had for a while, and I love it. I think it's really well thought out. I mean, a lot of times I do use the built-in Torpedo that's built into my Rev amp, but I love having this product. And I think it's a really great product that we could actually use in conjunction with our Helix, or even more so our HX Stomp, to add some functionality that a lot of folks wish was in the Helix. So without further ado, let's dive into this. And I'm just going to fulfill this request that I've had from many people to showcase these fine products in conjunction with our Helix. Here we are over at HX Edit, and you'll notice I have a little preset set up. Looks a little different than what I normally do. I do have my little compressor at the end, just barely doing anything, just kissing the sound. I like that to be there. I have an effects loop, and you might be wondering what this is on loop 1. So I have something in the send and return. We'll talk about that in a second. I have a little tiny bit of transistor tape delay, which I'll turn off for now. And I have a Rev Gen Red amp model just sitting here in the path, which is going to be what I'm going to use for the bulk of today's video. But I also, you'll notice I have a disengaged Rev Gen Red preamp only version. And there's good reason we'll engage that later to fully utilize what the topic of this video is going to be. And that brings us back to the effects loop. What's in the effects loop? Well, what I decided to do is to take the send 1 out of the Helix and have that plugged in to the input of our Torpedo C.A.B M+ from the fine folks over at 2-Notes, take the output of that and put it into the return. So now I could take this C.A.B M+ and just move it around wherever I want in my signal path. Do I want it before my delay? Do I want it after my delay? Well, now I don't have to worry about actually patching this in physically in between anything, which would be difficult to do anyways in the Helix since we have our effects built in. But I can just slide this around. So I think this is a really great way to utilize both the features of the Helix in conjunction with the C.A.B M+. So basically what that does is inserts that in this path. And here's the sound we have before I show you the settings on the 2-Notes C.A.B M+. So that's what we have. So now we know what's going on our Helix. Let's go over to our Torpedo C.A.B M+ or Torpedo remote software, shall we call it. Now, I've done a video on this before, showcasing all the features, and you'll notice here we have this built-in clean amp platform because we can also use the Torpedo C.A.B M+ in conjunction with sort of an amp-in-the-box overdrive pedal and have everything we need built right into this to be our main amp, basically, on our pedal board. But we're not going to really be using it in conjunction with that, although we are going to explore something here that's very cool. Great features in this. We have a gate. We have the ability to dual mic a cabinet, independent control over our output preset levels, a lot of controls on our preamp and power amp. We have our built-in reverb. We have built-in enhancer, built-in EQ. I'm not really going to be dealing with these today, but these are beautiful features. And we have the ability to not only load just normal third-party IRs, but we also have the ability to use the proprietary 2Notes DynIR files, which you might ask, well, what they are. Well, they're basically giving us the ability to do something that a lot of folks have always wanted to be able to do in their Helix, and that is have kind of a real-world situation where we have an incredible mic'd cabinet sound with different mic selections and the ability to move those mics not only back in distance like we have in the Helix, but on and off axis. So anybody who's worked in a studio miking cabs will really like this ability to be able to move the mics around in a way that's much like the real world. And I got to say, the 2Notes folks have done a bang-up job, and they have an amazing selection of DynIRs available, and I'll showcase a few of those today. So you'll notice I've just mic'd this cab up with a Ribbon 121 mic and a Dyn 421, which is like a Sennheiser 421. Move the mics around a little bit, but we can really play around with this. Balancing the mics different, using different microphones that we have at our disposal. You'll see we have all of these different possibilities. Even mic the back of the cabinets. You know, really flexible. Now, you might ask what DynIR I'm using here, and I'll just come back to this little setting that I kind of liked roughly here. I'm actually using a cabinet from the amazing new Steve Stevens Platinum collection from the fine folks at 2Notes, which is a DynIR package they put together with the legendary Steve Stevens, who was a guitar player for Billy Idol, who also played the Top Gun anthem and has played with Michael Jackson. And anyways, he needs no introduction from me. He's a brilliant guitar player and an absolute legend. And he did, and the 2Notes folks did an amazing job on this Platinum collection DynIR package, which I also did a separate video for, and I'll try to remember to put the link to those in the description below. So you notice I have a little bit of reverb on here. You have a nice selection of different reverb rooms that you can use more as a room or as an ambience, more like a normal reverb effect would be. And as I mentioned before, we have the EQ and enhancer and whatnot. But now this adds this functionality so that we could actually move these microphones around in physical space. Really, really great feature. Now, there is one downfall to this in using it with the Helix. And one feature that I kind of wish was on the C.A.B M Plus would be the ability to control it via MIDI. That would be very cool, because then as we switch presets on our Helix, we could also have different settings on our C.A.B M Plus controlled via MIDI, which would be very cool. But unfortunately, that's not a possibility right now. But I think that would be very, very cool and would make it almost the perfect match for folks who wanted to add this kind of functionality to the Helix. So what we can do is switch out to other cabs. We have a nice little setting here of, let's say, you know, the Ribbon 121 and a dynamic 421 position where we can actually, without moving those around, pick a different cabinet. So something like maybe the Rev 412 with vintage 30s. You see it switches out, but all my other settings stay the same. I really like this because we can go through and listen to different cabs and hear how they compare to one another without any of these other variables switching, and just hearing the sonic character of each cab. I apologize if the little pull down menu is partially off screen here. I'm picking the different cabs you'll see here. So you'll notice I'm picking some from the Steve Stevens collection. We have some from the actual just Rev collection, which all sound absolutely fabulous. We can go down to 112. And of course, as we know, we could change out the different microphones. We could just even go with one microphone. And play around with those. So lots of great possibilities, and we really hear how great these sound. I'm going to go back to a real favorite of mine here, this Stevens Brit 80 Ace 412. Really like the sound of that. One other way that I think a lot of folks could really use this to quote unquote supercharge their Helix would be to do this. In the Helix, we have the ability to not just use an amp model, but use just the preamp version of that amp model. So in this case here, the Rev Gen Red preamp, we could use this and then come over here and engage our power amp section. So a really cool feature on the C.A.B M Plus is the ability to model different power amps. We have single-ended 6L6, single-ended EL34, EL84, and KT88. And we have push-pull 6L6, EL34, EL84, and KT88. And we can have a pentode and triode setting. Depending on what we choose, we have depth controls and also contour and depth controls. And there's a lot of possibilities here. So as I said, coming over here now, we just have our Rev Gen Red preamp section on the go. Now we could match it up. Let's say we wanted to hear what that sounds like with the single-ended EL84 power amp section. You can adjust the volume, how much we're pushing that power amp. Much like the master volume would be on a normal amp model. What if we wanted a single-ended KT88s? Now, obviously, we would probably want to go back after making these adjustments and change up maybe our mics. Maybe we find something too dark or too woolly sounding and we want to do something. And we want to play around with those to get a different tone, but we can see there's a lot of possibilities here. We could even get rid of any of the preamp or amp modeling from our Helix and utilize just the clean preamp in here. I believe this is modeled after a Fender Bassman, and we could dial in a tone with that. Come over to our Helix and use some of the amazing overdrive pedals that we have in here. Utilize our delay. And again, we have endless possibilities here as far as overdrive pedals go. And we could come back over here and play around again with different combinations of power amps. Play with our settings on our preamp. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, and obviously this video can't go on forever showing you all of them, but in combination with all the different DynIRs we have, the combination of using EQ, enhancement, the reverb built in, the mic positions, and the ability to move those around on and off axis, change the distance, different power amp configurations with different tweakability there, a preamp possibility if we wanted, used in conjunction with either the amp modeling or the preamp modeling in the Helix with all the effects, the ability to move that around with an effects loop to different positions really does give us the ability to supercharge our Helix in a sense and really deal with maybe something that a lot of folks find they don't like about the Helix, which is just using the stock cabs. Again, as I've said, I love the stock cabs. I use them all the time. I've created some really great presets that I use for sessions, live, etc., and I've never had any complaints about them. The tones are great. They don't really take as much work as folks think they do to sound really amazing. But the addition of the C.A.B M Plus is a very cool addition, not only just for impulse response use, but also, as I showed, for the power amp section, the preamp section, the different ways we can add reverb. Maybe we're going to want to free up blocks in our HX Stomp. I really think somebody with an HX Stomp setup could really do well adding a C.A.B M Plus to their rig. You're going to have all this functionality we talked about today, free up some blocks as well, which is a fabulous thing for those in the Helix. Free up some processing power in the HX Stomp, and that also applies to the Helix. We could free up some processing power there. Never a bad thing. I just want to make more people aware of this and sort of fulfill that request I've had from so many folks to hear how this sounds in conjunction with the Helix, and also how we could use some of that functionality to maybe add some of the things that we feel were missing from the Helix. I'm not saying I really feel there was anything missing from it, but I know some folks feel that way. So this could be a possible solution for that. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Go give my friends over at 2Notes a look at some of their amazing products. I'm a really, really big fan of that company, and really great folks that are doing some beautiful work. And I thought you guys might enjoy seeing how that could work in conjunction with your Helix. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to my channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.